You know, one thing about IPD is that it is not a soft, fuzzy, hand-holding type thing. IPD is actually a series of principles used in order to achieve higher levels of outcome. And this often people tend to start thinking about it's all just about feel good, getting on together. It is not. It is essentially, as said, a prescription. It is a method, a business methodology for achieving higher levels of performance. There are currently a set of case studies which have been issued by AIACC and AIA, which go on, talk about six completed projects. You can get them, by the way, from the AIACC site, which is one of the last slides to indicate where it is. But essentially, we're talking about, in the new definition, a project delivery method which is contractually based and has, at a minimum, the owner, the architect, and the contractor together. In fact, in the projects that we have, and in all the projects, you have to have the key subs on early, and they have to be part of the cost-sharing principle. Not everyone, but the key people. And you also have the key consultants involved as well. I like to summarize and kind of think of this a little more simply. I refer to IPD basically as a value-based virtual organization, which is aligned with the project. What do I mean by value-based? A lot of you probably have some experience with partnering, in which people basically agree that they're going to follow certain rules at the beginning, but they aren't binding. The problem with that is when the rubber hits the road, people fall back to their traditional behaviors. In fact, they go back and look at the contracts, which tell them exactly how to act. And you want behaviors. We're trying to achieve better behaviors with IPD. But if in fact there are no consequences if you don't do that behavior, then in fact it's an aspiration, it's not a value. We're talking about a project delivery system in which there are consequences for your behaviors. Virtual organization, we're stitching together from the owner, the architect, the contractor, the key principles, essentially a group that works together. IPD projects range from very small, relatively small, to very large. One of the larger projects right now, which is IPD-ish because it's public, is the UCSF Medical Center. And there's the Integrated Center for Design and Construction. If you go in there, it's got a floor plate which is about maybe half this floor plate here, and it's completely filled with architects, contractors, subcontractors, vendors, all working side to side. And that's what we're talking about, a virtual organization. For all practical purposes, that project is an organization. And the third thing, though, is that what we're trying to say is we have a value-based organization. We put it together, and it's aligned to the project, which means essentially that the outcomes, compensation, the way we look at whether or not we have behaviors is based on achieving our definition of project outcomes. By the way, those don't have to be just money. Project outcomes means anything you put in as a significant goal of the project. We've looked at this and basically have come up with a series of elements that we tend to believe need to be in a pure IPD project. Now, by the way, not every project's a pure IPD project. We do projects in the public sector. We do projects where, for a number of reasons, you can't get everything. We call them IPD-ish projects. That's like UCSF Medical Center, which we were involved in. You try to get as much as you can. But if you can get it all, there's a reason for each one of these elements. First is early involvement of key participants. Second is shared risk reward based on project outcome. Joint project control and collaborative decision making. There's a little difference there. Joint project control you can think of as the strategies for the project. Collaborative decision making is more at the tactical level, the day-to-day level. Reduce liability exposure and jointly developed and validated targets. Those are the things that have to be in the structure. And the structure is predominantly reflected in the contract, although there's what I call a microstructure, which is all those things you put into the project manual. It's not enough to have the structure. You also have to have a mind shift. And part of that mind shift is this is a trust-based relationship. One of the things we tell virtually everybody is you don't get into bed in IPD with someone you don't trust. You have to, because you're going to use that trust during the course of the project. It's trust reinforced with validation and reinforced with other things, but trust is there. And there must be willingness to collaborate. By the way, there are a lot of people who fail that last test. A major architect who was not here, I won't tell you where they are. I can remember one of the things they said is, thank God we don't get involved in those things where we actually have to talk to people. You know, from their standpoint, they want to do it their way and their way alone. That's not IPD. There are other things that we call catalysts, and you don't actually have to have them theoretically for IPD. And among other things, the Australians didn't have most of these when they did their alliance projects. One is building information modeling, and the other one is lean project delivery, essentially lean design and construction tools. But the basic point is they both make them better. Like a chemical catalyst, they add a lot. You would really not want to do an IPD project without BIM, because it's a wonderful way to communicate and to share information. And there are techniques that have come up from lean design and construction and other approaches which in fact facilitate your ability to operate in IPD. And how do they fit together? Said that there was a reason for each one of these things. The early involvement of key participants basically gives you the ability to have the right people at the table to make the decisions. You're not designing in the abstract. You're designing based upon the information of the people who actually know how to install. You can do more in terms of resolving issues at that early design stage than you can at any other time. That's the time to make the choice. You've got the right people at the table. Now, we've talked to a lot of people. I'm not going to pick on designers here, but I'm thinking of a structural engineer particularly, that was saying, I'd love to give my information to the contractor, except that increases my chance of being sued, so I really can't give them that information. The reason you have risk allocation, liability waivers, is not because it's a nice fuzzy thing to do or it makes people feel good. It's you do not want to have creativity extinguished. And virtually every study of creativity indicates that fear does not help creativity. In fact, one of those things when we're trying to put a project together, we say, when people say, I feel uncomfortable, and you're asking me to do a little bit more, and we think that's really just where we want it. We want people basically breathing hard going into a project, but not hyperventilating. Hyperventilation gets you to defensiveness. The risk allocation is there to remove fear. So early involvement risk allocation, people can now start getting creative. That gives you design optimization. That goes to efficiency. You also have the right people to tell you how to do things, which indicates efficiency. Skin in the game, essentially, shared risk and reward also means that people have to execute efficiently if they're going to maximize their profit. Joint project management gives you the right people. One of those things we've also learned is that in risk studies of risk is people fear risks they can't control. Not only that, they overfear risks that they can't control. Think about the number of people who happily get into a car but are afraid of airplanes. Airplanes are statistically safer, but they can't control the airplane. They think they can control the car, and therefore they're less concerned about it. By giving people control, not only is it kind of the right thing to do, and putting the right people in to make the decisions, but it also reduces their sense of risk and fear. Joint project management also gives you commitment. You're committed to those things you can control and you do something with. Commitment goes up, basically, skin in the game also does that. And joint validation of targets. You all agree what it is you're about to achieve. When talking to subcontractors, it's interesting, a number of them said, because we are involved early, and people ask us for our opinion, we care about the total outcome. You're getting people out of your silos. If you remove that fear, people can look over another person's shoulder and make suggestions and not worry about the impact. And it's even better if they make those suggestions and it affects their final outcome. We use shared pain and gain. That's basically the ability, the amount of money people make on the project based upon being put at risk is the feedback loop, which then drives us. So the point that I really want to make is these elements are in the contracts, not because somebody just thinks it's a nice thing to do, but because they are aimed at achieving the behaviors you want to achieve.